Hey guys, this is Dale Tedder, and welcome to the Walking Points podcast. And I am with my good friends and fellow pastors, David Preston and David Mullins. And last week we finished the Mind of Christ series that we had done, and I thought it was a good setup for where we're going to be headed now. We're going to be talking about a variety of things in the weeks to come, but one feature we want to have each week is an Ask the Pastor sort of Q&A. And some weeks it may be the only thing we talk about. It depends on how succinct we are and how much we know about what we're talking about. There will be no gotcha questions. Everyone will know the answers well in advance. So here's what you can do. Write, if you go to our churches, write us questions, send us an email, things. They don't have to be, where did Cain get his wife kind of questions. It can be that, but it can be, why does our church practice communion this way?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm struggling with this temptation. How can I, experience victory in that area?
Yeah.
Or so about the Christian life, your own life, things you're struggling with, or it can be, I don't understand what the Bible means by this. Can you explain this verse? Or just whatever questions that you want to ask. But I didn't want you to think it had to be like the hardest intellectual questions. But it can be that because we're going to make David Preston answer everything.
There you go.
So anyway, but I thought, if we're going to have a segment called Ask the Pastors, then yeah, you can Google it. But if we're going to have a segment called Ask the Pastors, then I thought, because we don't all, those of you watching and listening don't know everybody as well as the folks from our own congregations know each of us. So I thought I would have us just introduce ourselves this week. And I told the guys, share a little bit about how God called you to ministry, where you went to school, what, maybe what were the things that you really enjoyed studying. And even now, what are those things each one of us gravitates towards in our own studies, but then also where we're serving and what it is perhaps that, really ignites a passion within us when we're preaching or teaching a Bible study or, sharing the gospel with somebody or pastoral care or whatever it may be. It might be all the above. So that's a lot, and we're going to try to be as succinct as possible today. But David Preston, I'm going to turn it over to you, and why don't you just share a little bit about your call story and your ministry now?
Well, so this September I celebrated 37 years of professional ministry, being paid to do this. And
Wow.
so I and I celebrate 37 years of being married this December. So that keeps things, it's easy to keep up with things that way. Um, but so I went kind of a little bit of a roundabout way. I grew up there at Southside, grew up with all the little ladies in the church coming up and pinching my cheek and going, "Oh, you're going to be a minister one day," and really rebelling against that, not wanting to do that. Those that know my personal story, I was going off to study to be a photographer. I wanted to be a Playboy photographer, as a matter of fact. I was running away so far from that. Uh,
There goes our
anyway,
family friendly rating.
yeah, family friend. Well, hey, hey, nothing graphic. But anyway, you call me Jonah there. But I ran away. God didn't let me go. I went into building construction, loved it, enjoyed doing that. Thought I had found what I wanted to do, and God didn't let me be satisfied. Still volunteered at the church, did all kinds of things. It was a little wild during that period as well. I always say I was the prodigal son who stayed home and wasted his father's living right in front of him. um, but eventually God got a hold of me and got me going in the direction of ministry. Still took me a little bit of a roundabout way. Had a chance to spend a summer down on the island of St. Vincent in the Caribbean, thanks to Gene Zimmerman as a youth worker. Totally blew me away. Learned, overcame my fear of speaking in public down there. Had a fear of speaking in public. And as I told people, once I started talking, you couldn't shut me up after that. And then from there, major in English in college, the perfect thing because I knew I was going to go into ministry. That was perfect for me to do. Got exposed to a lot of things, but most importantly, critical thinking and being
Mm.
able to read critically, to critically look at ideas and things like that. So anyway, went to Candler School of Theology. Actually, really felt like I got a tremendous education there. In terms of just the broad spectrum of things. I had a chance to do different things, supervise ministry. I did my third year contextual with Habitat for Humanity, thought I was going to go into social ministry. Took 3 years of Greek, loved that, loved the scholastic part of it. Just tried to do social ministry, worked for Appalachia Service Project for almost exactly a year, and discovered that really wasn't where God called me. And so it took me a few more rounds of that, but eventually ending up at Faith United Methodist Church and having a pastor there, Margie Howell, who encouraged me, supported me, recognized my gifts and grace, got me to finally finish up my seminary degree to go back and pick up the last couple of credits, and got me in the ordination program, and then put me in the RIM group where I met, you guys, although I'd met Dale some years before, but that put me together with the band. And, and was ordained as a deacon, really liked the aspect of discipleship development, but also realized that wasn't completely it for me. So I had an opportunity to serve as a local pastor now I'm in my 9th year at West Connect United Methodist Church, and really have developed gifts for administration and things like that there that I didn't necessarily recognize before, didn't really like before. That was one of the things that I didn't like about pastoral ministry, was the fundraising and budgets and all of that sort of thing, but learned actually the wisdom of my first boss back there, David Bevel Jones, way back there in Atlanta. He says, you got to learn that stuff or somebody will eat your lunch. And it's very true, very, very true, that if you don't know that, then that can cause problems and for your ministry. So having to learn the nuts and bolts things. The preaching part of it is fun. That's the part of it that I enjoy the most in a lot of ways, is because I can get up and act out for 25 minutes, in front of an audience, every Sunday morning. But I enjoy that. It's fun. And I like to be able to convey information that way. I like teaching, still do that in my congregation, do a Bible study. I like to do things where integrating the preaching and teaching together. Doing Dale Tedder's wonderful new book on following Jesus right now, integrating those things together. But and the folks in my church really like that as well. They like to have things, a variety of stuff like that together, and they like to learn. So anyway, but that's what brought me to this place. And again, for me, the thing that keeps me going, why I serve at my church, why I do Emmaus, why I do Kairos, the prison ministry and all, is because I really enjoy seeing the light come on in people's eyes. For some people to see the light maybe rekindled or lit in a way that hasn't been before. For some people, seeing the light come on for the first time. And that's a pretty amazing and cool thing to get to do. Just came off an Emmaus weekend, watched some ladies, went on a ladies weekend, very different experience. But watching some lights come on the pilgrims, and even more importantly, some lights rekindled in some of the ladies that were serving on the team. So, they got re-inspired. So anyway, like I said, for me, that's the important thing, is to see the transformation in people's lives.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that. Well, David Mullins, let's move to you and have you share some of that.
Well, where to begin? So I am next summer will be 20 years of vocational ministry. I hesitate to use the term professional just because I know how I've executed those 20 years. But yeah, there were a lot of signs early on that this is where God was calling me to, and I didn't put dots together. Actually I grew up in the church, Seminole Heights United Methodist in Tampa, Florida, and then Oak Grove United Methodist following that. And in school, I had a reputation as a church kid, and I had some kids say, "Oh, you ought to be a pastor." And this is like, second grade. Who says that in second grade? And I'm like, nah, there's got to be some Christians who aren't pastors. I'll be one of those. But I had a pastor when I was in middle school speak a prophetic word over me that he claimed me for ministry in a Methodist church. You don't see that happen very often,
man.
And we had another kid and I had done a musical performance, and he claimed me for ministry while I was packing up my instrument. I didn't even hear it. Years later, Mom's like, that.
Wow.
But went until high school. I started getting involved in youth group leadership. God started bringing up different gifts he had given me for ministry. So helping people walk through conflict, teaching, being in a leadership role. The youth leader said, "Oh, let's get him leading Bible study here and there." At some point, the pastor's like, "Let's get that kid up there preaching." And it just, as I did those things, I felt the peace and the joy of God every time. There was even a time where I had led worship and done probably about 75% of the service. I forgot to prep a children's sermon, so the senior pastor jumped in there and did the parts of communion that I couldn't as an unordained young man. And I remember being in the back, shaking hands and talking with folks, and had a couple friends back there. And I'm like, this is what I need to be doing. This is what I want to spend the rest of my life doing. Went to Asbury Theological Seminary and up in Wilmore, Kentucky, and had a great experience up there. Good teaching up there, good folks, good community. Kind of isolating, but had a really good experience there. Really opened my eyes to how to read the word in some ways. I mean, I'd always read scripture, had Mom walked me through devotional reading very early on in life. Dad taught me how to ask good questions of what I was being taught by others about the scriptures. And on a few occasions, we sat down with a Bible study workbook and this in one hand and the scriptures in the other, and said, "Okay, is this guy really teaching the word or not?" But something about seminary categories of understanding literature and interpreting things that made no sense in high school English and no sense in college English suddenly were unlocked. And so it was just a great eye-opening experience. Maybe that's why part of what I loved the most, even though it wasn't the initial loudest part of my call, but I fell in love with teaching the word. And I fell in love with teaching Bible study and preaching from the word, and found out quickly that I'm not good at topical preaching because of that. But I love helping people make connections, particularly Old Testament, New Testament connections. I get excited when I can walk somebody through saying, "Hey, this random event that happens in the Old Testament with Moses putting a brass snake on a pole and people believing it, and why the heck is that there?" Well, John 3.
Mm-hmm.
I love being able to help people make connections like that. And it's exciting. It's fun when I see people go, "Oh, wait, that's what that means." And it just, there's nothing better. So I'm currently serving as senior pastor at Lakeview Christian Church in Lake Placid, Florida. Been here about 2.5 years, I guess. And good crew of folks, very excited to see what God's leading us through now that we've gotten through some chunky parts of denominational politics. We're excited about moving forward with some other things. And did I put that diplomatically enough?
That was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Doing some things with discipleship and evangelism. And I'm trying to figure out if I have margin to squeeze another Bible study in.
Yeah, I get that.
But yeah, so
that's awesome. Well,
yeah.
So 20 years coming up.
20 years coming up. Yep.
Wow.
And,
I was trying to think when we were all in the residence and ministry program when you were here. I was trying to think how long ago that was. Can you think of when that was?
Yes, I started with you guys in 2007.
Okay.
That's when we moved back to Florida. I had been doing ministry up in Kentucky for 3 years and in their residency program, and then transferred into this one.
Okay.
But I'm a Florida kid. I was always coming back to Florida, but
right.
since I was serving up there, they decided to get me started. So
I gotcha. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I if you had told anybody I knew, but I shouldn't say anybody. There were some people that believed in me, but if you had told most people back in high school and certainly college, Dale, you should go into pastoral ministry. There was no one saying that. And I grew up in the church. I went to Orange Park Methodist and grew up there. We moved here when I was in 5th grade. I think I'm losing my voice here, so forgive me. But so we moved in when I was in 5th grade, and I grew up there. I mean, if it was open, my family was there, for worship. I was very involved in youth. I was, there's somebody who may listen to this one day who will know what I mean by this, but I was the youth group president, but I didn't do any of the work. I was a great delegator. And so I remember, there are two things that God has done in my life that has just, if nothing else, has proven the existence of God for me. Of course, besides my salvation. But one is petrified. I was the poster child for being petrified of speaking in front of any size group at any time.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, it was terrifying for me. I had some bad experiences. I've even preached a sermon on it one time about how that experience happened and back in 5th grade. And it was a horror show. But so that was always kind of stamped on my heart and mind. And then being a student, I did, my mom often tells this story that she got one of those evaluations from a teacher, one of those mid-semester things, elementary school or something like that. And it said, Dale, we've observed, tries to do the least amount of work he can do. And he's not living up to his potential or something. I was one of those potential conversations. And so, I mean, I was a solid C student, through high school and college. And, so one of the things my parents, when I was called to ministry, which that probably will take much longer than we have time for, but I was a pretty good kid in middle school and high school. I didn't do anything major, but I felt like, I don't know, I went to college and tried to make up for lost time or something. And but it was interesting because I would have told you at any given time that I was a Christian during that period. And, maybe that'll be a ask the pastor kind of question that we'll deal with down the road. But when I would go out, David Preston, you mentioned the prodigal son, and go out with riotous living, I think as the King James puts it, I never felt good about it. The Holy Spirit, I really believe, did a work of conviction in my heart, where, God says he disciplines those he loves. And I remember not even be able to looking toward heaven, but just feeling deep regret. Now, sadly, I would check that off, and get back at it the next week. But my last year of college was a year of sleepless nights, worry. Like, I've just squandered 4 years of college. I majored in criminal justice because it was about the last thing that I could squeeze in to get a major, because I had taken a lot of sociology and psychology courses and things like that. So I ended up minoring in psychology. But I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it terrified me. And so when I graduated, I was applying for some things in town in the law enforcement world, and never felt settled. But while I was doing that, I was helping a friend with the youth ministry at my local church. And that is the year, it was a government law enforcement thing. So it was a very, very, very long process. And because of that, God had plenty of time to begin a work of calling. And it was I fought tooth and nail. I said, God, you remember me in college, and now you can't possibly be telling me that there's more school ahead of me. You got to be kidding me. And so, I mean, I fought and resisted, and David Preston, again, you mentioned Jonah. It's like God got his way, as he usually does. And so it was quite a process, and I'd love to tell that story another day. But so I went off to seminary. And the other thing that I would mention, that proving the existence of God, was my parents would often ask, what did you do with our son? Because where I was running from studying, and I didn't want to get near books, and I certainly didn't want to read, heaven forbid. I couldn't get enough when I went to seminary. I mean, it was I tell people, I think I was already a Christian. I'm pretty sure I was already a Christian, but I became a born again student. And that things clicked, planets aligned, and I couldn't read enough. And I went to Candler School of Theology up at Emory in Atlanta, and they boasted at the time the second largest theological library in the country at the time, I think, behind Yale. And I lived in the stacks, man. I mean, I just read everything. I would read footnotes of footnotes, I mean, everything I could get my hands on. And things just really started. I was still learning to study and take tests and stuff like that. But I started loving writing and things like that. So anyway, graduated, took my first church. I was on the road to becoming an elder in the United Methodist Church. And so I had a little church down near Melbourne. And so I was there, and it was the last place I wanted to be, and it was the best place I needed to be. God knew, because I thought, I'm going to be an associate pastor. I'll hide behind the pastor. That way I won't have to speak in front of people, and just all these different things. And God said, no, I'm going to put you front and center, and you're going to have to pray in front of everybody. You're going to have to preach regularly. I mean, it was exactly what I needed, but it was, bless those people's hearts, is all I can say. They heard a lot of really bad sermons and a lot of bad prayers, and they were patient with me. Anyway, but I started kind of what you guys have shared a little bit. I started realizing within the call of ordained ministry what I really wanted to do. And so I started moving in a direction that ended up moving me into the ordination of being a deacon. Now, that wasn't a thing. Everybody was ordained a deacon when I came in. That was like part one of your ordination, and then you would become an ordained elder. I did that. I mean, I did that for 6 or 7 more years, and was moving in the direction of elder. And then way back in '96, the United Methodist Church came up with a new form of ordination where they kind of recognized deacon as a possibility. And so as the folks in the conference at the time were saying, we're making it up as we go along. We're trying to figure out what do we need to do to have that as an ordination. And I guess I was sort of a guinea pig. But at that time, slightly before it actually, because I knew I wanted to really focus on teaching, I'd contemplated even, do I want to be a college teacher or a seminary teacher or something? And I said, well, I need some more education. And so Asbury Seminary was not in Orlando yet. So I went to Reformed Theological Seminary and studied, biblical studies and theological studies and philosophy and Christian thought and apologetics and worldview and all of that. And that was great. And that really helped me focus. But this is, one last little part of this is when I finally came back, because I had served at Southside before. When I came back to Southside, I came back as a deacon instead of somebody on the track of becoming an elder. and I could really focus on discipleship and Bible study and pastoral care, but just especially Bible studies and small groups and just a life of discipleship. And the bug to go off and teach somewhere else left me, because I realized this really, it's what I thought it was. And it was very fulfilling. It was almost God affirmed it after the fact. So, that was really meaningful to me. And, I've been here now, I guess this is I'm finishing up my 31st year of
Wow.
ministry. So coming up on number 32. And, I finally felt fulfillment, and, like I was living into the purpose for which God had equipped me and called me and all of that when I came back to Southside. And, I've been here now, this go around, coming up on 25 years, next year will be 25 years. So I just passed 24. And, when you stay at a church for a very long time, you observe things that didn't occur to me when I first got here, kind of like the life patterns of a church and the life cycle,
Yes.
and, new people coming in, and then you think this is the way it's going to be. And it's not, some folks will leave, some new folks will come, and you see different cycles of a church. And so it's been a blessing to be a part and walk with people for a long time in their faith. And, there've been highs and lows and everywhere in between, but, it's a real privilege, and blessing to be with folks through that. But I love that God, I love everything I've went through. I didn't love it at the time, I'll just be honest, but, on this side of things, it's just exciting to see, what God was up to. Really gives me an appreciation for his providence and how he's moving things along and opening doors and closing doors, and that work of his Spirit that, you don't even sense at the time. And then other times, it feels like a 2x4, so, but so that's that's the short version, although it wasn't very short. But, anyway, so the main purpose of all of this was just for the folks that are listening to us or watching us to get to know a little bit about who we are, and, how we got to where we are, and what we enjoy doing. And so I'll just kind of leave everybody with this, that we're going to have an Ask the Pastors feature. Who knows? Maybe we'll get a lot of questions and we'll have lots of things to ask. But here's what I want to make sure this is the qualifier. Doesn't mean we know every answer to every question you're going to ask. Please let me say that. We are not, there's a radio program used to be called the Bible Answer Man. That is not who we are. But here's the thing.
I don't think he had all the answers either. But
yeah, well, that's true too. But, all of us together, you've heard there's a cumulative history of ministry and study and all of that. And, we will have time to reflect on the questions prior to ever answering them. So if nothing else, we've learned how to do research over the years and study and prepare. So hopefully we'll have something coherent to say. But, when I was thinking about this new feature, I thought, we talked about thinking Christianly. And if we provide nothing else, I just want to help folks with a framework of how to think about the questions they're asking.
Yes.
So, if someone has a question, an archaeological question or question about Christian living, as much as anything, I hope we can just provide some structure for, be a good counselor here and say, well, how do you think you ought to answer the question based on what you know about what the Bible says? And, we're not going to pawn off every question by asking you a question. Jesus was great at that, by the way. He would always ask questions in return, get people thinking. So that might be a part of it. But we know also that you're asking legitimate questions that you're struggling with, perhaps. So this isn't, don't just think about archaeological or numerical questions about the Bible and things. But we would love it if you would, you'll be anonymous. We will not share your name and anything. So you can feel free to ask whatever kind of questions you'd like that you might be struggling with personally, or somebody in your life, or maybe just some intellectual questions that have caused doubt in your life and things that you've struggled with, just know that you're not alone with anything you're going to ask. People, the reason that the two Davids and I can answer some of these questions on the fly is because we've been asked them many times over the years by different people. It's not because we're so smart, but it's because we've heard them a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's given us a chance to reflect on them as well. So either of you guys have anything, any parting wisdom for the folks before we call it a day?
If I'm doing the math right, we have something between 85 and 90 years of collective pastoral experience. So feel free to tap
That's
it.
true. That's right. A variety of pastoral experience. Yes.
Yeah. And I will say, this is one of my convictions. I didn't say this earlier, but one of my convictions in ministry, and one of the things I keep bringing people back to, is do not be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
People I have seen more people fall out of faith in churches that don't allow for questioning than churches that help you question and help you find the answers to your questions. Because Scripture is God's self-revelation to us. And if there's a question, he's got an answer. You may have to dig. It may not come easy, but he's got an answer. So
yeah, that's a good
right.
word. And
that's a good, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I would add in that same vein that, that even if we make a mistake, or even if we go in a direction that we really aren't meant to go, if we do it in the right spirit, I mean, obviously if it's not, violating something, but if we feel a calling to do something and it's not really what we were called to do, that's my great education, is God will bless that even then. God won't open the door that he doesn't want the door opened,
right.
But he will give you something out of that. He will give you a blessing. He'll give you knowledge. He'll give you understanding. And I think that that's the thing. We need to be willing to make mistakes, again, going into it with the right spirit, the right hearts, and God will make something. God will make something good even out of a no. So
yeah,
those are great words. And one last word is, hey, it might be fun to watch us disagree with one another, because we may not agree.
We'll have to get Hudson on board for that, I think.
Yeah.
That would be an episode.
We'll invite a friend of ours, and this will be like throwing gas on a fire. So that'll be a lot of fun. So anyway, well, guys, thank you for sharing your story today. And for those of you watching, if you're from any of our churches, you've no doubt have our email address, or you can go to daletedder.com and there's some contact information that you can reach out to me. And like I said, it'll be anonymous. You can ask whatever you would like. We'll get to it when we get to it, and we'll do our best. But we appreciate you being with us today and look forward to being with you next time.